I had these horrible dreams for as long as I can remember. And when I was about 2 years old, I told my mother that my name was not really Barbro, it was Anne. And of course my mother didn't know what to say, and she didn't really understand it, I guess. So she just thought that I had very lively fantasy. And I kept having my dreams, and I tried to find out how strange it was that I was living in two worlds at the same time. I know my name was Anne Frank, but they insist calling me Anne Barbro. And my parents insisted me to call them Mom and Pa, and I knew they were not my real parents. So it was a very difficult situation to grow up like this, because I had no one to talk to. And even though my parents were very, very loving and caring, they didn't want to deal with this. So they just pushed me down when I talked about it. So the years went past, and I kept telling them that my name was Anne, and that my father was soon going to come and get me, and I was going to leave them. And my mother got so worried, so she took me to a psychiatrist because she thought I was crazy. And at that time, I was about 6 years old at that time. So I have found out that it was not really a good thing to talk about, because everybody got so tense when I tried to explain to them what I experienced. So I realized that this doctor that was supposed to talk to me would be like any other adult and just make me feel bad about it. So I didn't tell him anything about it. I was just like a normal 6-year-old happy girl. And he said to my mother that she's as normal as she can be. So don't worry about it, she will grow out of it. Well, I never did. I had my memories with me, and I just became more and more quiet about it. But then when I was 7 and I started school, I learned how to read and how to write. And that was a wonderful, wonderful relief, because now I could write. And I could tell the paper everything that I couldn't tell anyone else. Because when I wrote it, I could throw it away, which I did. Most of it I threw away right away. But a lot of pieces of paper were spread around in my room. And it was everything from poetry to little stories, thoughts about the higher power, reincarnation, where we came from, where we were going. And one day, a friend of the family found all these pieces of papers laying around everywhere. And he read it, and he gathered it, and he asked my parents if he may take it and show it to a publisher, and they said, by all means, we don't care. She had done that for so many years, so we didn't even think about it. At that time, I was about 11 years old. So he gathered everything he could find and asked me for more, and I just gave him what I had. And before I knew it, my first book was published, called Man on Earth, and that was published when I was 12. And it kind of took off from there, because I was so young and there was a lot of publicity around it. But nothing that I had memories from being Anne Frank or anything, because I had decided not to talk about it anymore. I was, not to say ashamed, but I was feeling really awkward, because in school I realized that Anne Frank was a famous person. And the first time I heard about that, I was shocked, actually, because all of a sudden my teacher started to talk about Anne Frank, and here I was knowing that I was Anne Frank, and how can she talk about me? It didn't really work for me. And then eventually, of course, she told about the diary and about everything. So I realized pretty soon that it was not very smart to go around and say that I had been Anne Frank. So I just became very quiet about it. Also, when I was 10 years old, I go back a little bit in time here, when I was 10 years old, my parents decided to take me and themselves for a trip around Europe to see the big cities, London, Paris, Amsterdam, Berlin. And so we went on our trip, and eventually we came to Amsterdam. We stayed in a hotel, and my parents wanted to see, of course, everything that was worth seeing in Amsterdam, and Anne Frank's house was one of it. And I guess at that time they had just said that my talk about Anne Frank and everything was fantasies, and they had just dismissed it more or less. And we were at the hotel room, and my father said that let's do the Anne Frank house first. So I called for a cab. And I found myself saying to them, we don't need a cab, we're not far away. And I knew exactly where we were. And he said, how can you say that? You've never been here before. I said, well, I don't know, but let me show you the way. I know it's not far. So they said, okay. So they walked with me, and I took them there, and we walked for maybe 10 minutes, and it was a little bit crisscrossing the streets. And when we came, I said, it's around the next corner, and we will be there. And we were, and of course both my parents, they were like, what is happening here? But they didn't say much. And then when we came up towards the house, I saw that the steps outside were different, were changed. So I stopped and I said, it's strange, they have changed those steps. And still my parents didn't say anything. And we went in, paid our tickets, and when I came into that house, it was the most horrifying feeling I have ever had. Because all of a sudden I was back to my dreams. I recognized everything I had seen ever since I was a little child. And I took my mother's hand, and when she felt how cold I was and sweaty I was, she said, my God, what's the matter with you? Don't you want to go in here? And I said, yes, I want to go. Just want to hold your hand. And we walked up those stairs, and we came up to the room where Anne Frank had lived. And I was absolutely terrified. But there was a part of me that wanted to see it, and I guess to see if I remember if I had the right pictures, and if everything was the same way that I knew it should be. So when I looked at one of the walls, I saw all these pictures from newspaper magazines that was cut out, and it was from movie stars and song stars and things. And it made me feel almost happy, because I said to my mother, look, the pictures are still there. And it was like almost coming home. And she said, what pictures? And she looked on the wall, and I looked on the wall, and there were no pictures there. I said, what do you mean? What are you talking about? I said, I saw those pictures on the wall, and I know they have been there. So she said, wait a minute. So she walked over to one of the guys that worked there and said, tell me, has it ever been pictures on this wall? And the guy said, yes, we just took them down a couple of weeks ago because Anne Frank put them up there, but we took them down because people are taking them and they're touching them, and they will all be destroyed. But now we're putting them in a frame and glass so no one can destroy them, but they will be up again. And I think that was the moment where my mother realized that it was not fantasy. Something had happened that was bigger than she could understand. So she just, hugged me and said, I understand, and you're not alone anymore. So I asked her if I could leave, because I just couldn't be there anymore. And of course my father, he was interested in seeing all the documentary papers and everything that was there, so they wanted to stay, and I promised them that I will just go outside and I will wait for you outside. So they let me go, and I walked down those stairs, and I was crying, I tell you, I was crying, and I was so scared. It was terrible. I walked down, and then when I was almost down, I see this man in a green uniform coming up behind me and hitting his arm over me. And I swear to you, he was so real like you are to me now. I know he was there. So I tried to shelter myself. I fell, and I fell down on the floor, and I was laying there. And when I looked up, I saw all these tourists standing there looking at me. And there was, of course, no man in a green uniform. So I stumbled out, and I waited outside for my parents, and they finally came out. And like I said, at that time, my mother realized that I actually had been Anne Frank and that I had lived before. She totally accepted it. And from that day on, she became very spiritual herself. My father was a little bit different because he was almost annoyed that he had been overproved that I had lived before. He didn't want to be overproved. He just wanted to live in his Christian world where everything was set right. So he said that, well, I can't understand how you could show us the way here, how you could see the steps and how you could see the pictures and everything. And I admit that you have probably been here one way or another before, but that's it. You are the only one, and I don't ever want to talk about this again. So, and that was fine with me because I got the support from my mother, and I finally felt like I had been there and I had dealt with it, and I hoped that I could put it behind me because I really didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to talk about it anymore. So I kept on writing my books, and that was my way of letting it out. But I didn't have any need whatsoever to tell people that I knew I had been Anne Frank or that I had memories or whatever. And I actually never thought I would. If someone had said to me just 6, 7 years ago that you will go out and speak in public and even write a book about you have being Anne Frank, and I would have said, never, that would never happen. But you see, you should never say never.
Were you able to meet any of Anne Frank's relatives?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I was introduced to Anne Frank's last living relative that is her cousin and that lives in Switzerland. And I was introduced to him about 6 years ago by my publisher in Switzerland. And this Buddy Elias is her name, the cousin of Anne Frank, and he had heard about me having memories as Anne Frank because my publisher knew about it, even though I didn't write about it, but he knew about it. So he had told Buddy Elias this, and Buddy said that he wants to meet me, even though he didn't believe in reincarnation. And I think that he was curious just to see what person would go around and claim that she had been Anne Frank. So my publisher told me when I was there for a book signing, they said that there's a famous actor, which Buddy Elias is actually a famous actor, that wants to meet you because he has read your books. So my publisher didn't tell me who he was. So we were invited there for dinner, and we went there, and I knocked the door and Buddy opened, and at the same moment we just fell in each other's arms. He was crying and I was crying. And we just sat alone for 2 hours and we just talked and talked and talked. And Buddy is the president of the Anne Frank's Foundation, which is a very powerful foundation with a lot of money. And as a president of the foundation, he's in a very vulnerable situation, of course. So when he went out to newspapers, when they asked him about me, and he went out there and he said that I really believe that she was Anne Frank. If anyone was Anne Frank, it's Barbro. It was after my book was published. So he came right into the hot fire there. And when I wrote my book, I also sent the manuscript to Buddy first. And I said, it's you to read this book and it's you to decide if it's going to be published or not. And he read it and he sent it back to me and he said that it's your story and it has to be published. So without him, it wouldn't have been. But when he went out and said that he really, supported me and my book and everything, he was almost killed. I mean, they went after him like crazy. And they wrote big articles about him, how the president of the Anne Frank's Foundation could be so crazy and believe in such stupid things, and where would this lead eventually with royalties and, all these stupid things. So, and he's an older man. I mean, he's 75 years old. And he got so affected by this, he almost had a heart attack. And he was really, really in bad condition for a while. And I just said to him and his wife too that, you just can't do this. You have to back off here and just don't make any statements. And he said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. So he has been, of course, questioned a lot to go out and talk about it, but he just doesn't do anything anymore with it. But we are very, very close friends. And every time I go to Switzerland, I stay with Buddy and his wife. And we have weekly contact, more or less.